Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Here are your hosts, Phil Adams, Jay Britton, and Andrew McCreadys.
Ever wonder why your eyes get bloodshot when you get high? We're going to talk about that. Jay's got some insight. The CDC solicits feedback from Americans who use cannabis for pain. And will bad weed eventually go extinct?
I hope so.
Andrew definitely hopes so, yes. We'll talk about exactly what we mean, and Jay's also got some state updates. But first, let me welcome everybody to another episode of VoteProPot-Cast. Thank you for joining us today for episode 121. I want to start with some news that just came over the wire recently, just as we're recording. Now, Andrew, you know about the task force that between some members of the Biden campaign and some members of the Bernie Sanders campaign, all about police reform and criminal justice and social justice. You heard about that going on, yes, and the cannabis component to that as well.
Yes, that's definitely a big part of it. Now, over 700,000 people a year get arrested for possession of cannabis, which is more than all violent crime combined.
It's
so it seems to me if you wanted to free up the police and lessen the interactions that they have, the number of interactions, that would be a good way to do it. Let's stay away from the nonviolent, victimless crime of marijuana possession and focus on people who do violent crime.
You think? Well, now, not the people from the Sanders campaign, but actually Senator Bernie Sanders himself took to the floor of the Senate not 3 hours ago, as this is being recorded on Thursday, to say that Congress should federally legalize marijuana as a step toward policing reform and addressing racial injustices. Now, we've documented before, and I think Senator Cory Booker cited data that says that white folks and black folks are not smoking any more weed than the other.
That is correct.
It's all about the same, and yet the data doesn't lie. Black people are getting arrested and incarcerated for possession of weed, for marijuana violations at a much higher rate than white folks, and that is just not right.
In some areas, it's 4 and 5 times the rate, which is just ridiculous because African-American men don't smoke any more marijuana than white men. They may smoke better weed, but they don't smoke more weed.
Maybe.
All the black guys I've partied with in my life always say no, it's a better weed than I did.
That medical grade we get is pretty freaking good. But,
well, that's just me. Anyway.
Well, but Sanders said exactly that very thing. He said, quote, in the midst of many crises we face as a country, it is absurd. Under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, marijuana is at Schedule 1, along with killer drugs like heroin. And right. He talked about the need to reduce the incidence of police violence, starting by reducing the interactions, just like you said. So this is a speech that he just gave just a few hours ago. So I wanted to make sure we got to that.
Well, also, as I understand it, some of members of Biden's campaign were involved in this. So that just, to me, implies that Biden's opinion on cannabis may be evolving through this campaign because he has been on record being against legalization.
Well, if so, good for him, That's
right. And why is that good for him?
Well, I mean, good on him, I should say.
No, because we were saying earlier that sometimes we complain about people who were outspoken against it, and then they change their mind, and we call them hypocrites.
Right.
Whereas our job here is to get people to change their minds and start supporting legalization. So when they do, instead of calling them hypocrites, we got to thank them and welcome to the party.
Absolutely, absolutely. It would be hypocritical of us to not, welcome people and when they see things our way, for crying out loud. So
that's kind of why we're here, is to try to convince people, to educate people and to get them on our side of the fence. So
absolutely. So when they do, welcome with open arms, and like we've gone over in the past as the resident conservative voice on VoteProPot-Cast, my job is to speak to the folks on the other side of the aisle who are dragging their feet. The people who are making the most noise for cannabis legalization have been, and pretty much always have been, the Democrats. And it's time that the Republicans who have been resisting all this time, not all of them, there's a lot who are on board, but the ones who are resisting need to, at some point, succumb to the logic of all of this.
That's right. Well, you need to talk to the people that have been dragging their feet and their knuckles about the cannabis issue.
Yeah.
Well, this whole economic downturn as a result of the coronavirus, is that going to affect it? Do you think more right-wing politicians will look at it as a source of income, a source of revenue, and maybe use that as their argument for changing their minds? I wonder. Well,
whatever gets them on the other side of the fence,
right?
As far as I'm concerned, on this issue, whatever gets it done. If that's what helps them sleep at night, great.
Yeah.
Economics.
Yeah, but I think some people on the right might use that as an excuse because they really can't change their mind. They can't say,
they're emotionally invested. People people on both sides of the aisle get emotionally invested in a position, and they don't want to give it up. But I would prefer, rather than have them, if they're going to change their minds for something, that it would be on the account of as a individual liberty issue.
There you go.
We have the right to do this, and the government intruding on us, telling us we can't, is not conservatism. And some of those, let's face it, knuckle draggers need to pick up their heads and see the logic of this.
And their knuckles. All right, let's cover some states. State update for the week. Got a bunch. Got Louisiana, Nevada. Did I do that right? Colorado, Maine,
yes,
Missouri, and
right.
Arkansas. We were having a debate how you pronounce it. And they say Nevada in Nevada. Us on the East Coast tend to say Nevada. Let's start with Louisiana. I got this off Normal's website. Democratic Governor John Bel Edwards has signed a series of bills into law greatly expanding patients' ability to access medical cannabis and medical cannabis products. Late last week, the governor signed a bill which expands the discretion of physicians so that they can recommend cannabis therapy for any condition that he or she consider debilitating to an individual patient and is qualified through his or her medical education and training to treat. So that what that does is it takes a direct turn from the original legislation that says you have to meet this criteria, right? You have to have...
Right. These are the conditions that you're allowed to treat with cannabis.
Right. You need to have 1 foot in the grave.
So the not necessarily in this state, but yes, in some states, but having a list of things. So the government is deciding what you can treat with cannabis rather than a doctor. This is saying it's up to the doctor's discretion. I love it. More states are doing it. Virginia's doing it. California's doing it. Maine's doing it. We're seeing it more and more. And, it's again about evolution. It's kind of the evolution of regulation. It starts out.
I think that's a great way to talk about it.
It really is. It starts out with, well, we better make a list of things you can treat it with. But when you stop and think about that, after a year or two of legalization, they're going, well, that's stupid. The doctor should determine that.
Right.
I mean, we don't have a list of what you're allowed to write other prescriptions for.
Or here's one. You should just be allowed to use it for no condition at all.
Right. That's coming.
I'm a healthy guy.
And here's the interesting thing, too. In Louisiana,
treat that with marijuana.
Treat that with marijuana.
In Louisiana, currently, you almost have to be dead to get this shit. It's like HIV or terminal cancer or something like that. I don't know exactly. Currently, there are only 4,000 patients registered.
Wow.
To get cannabis. 4,000.
Right.
So with this change, I hate to be a cynical libertarian, but some of this is cash. I mean, let's face it. If you've only got 4,000 people that can buy it, I mean, the revenues are very limited. Mm-hmm. So even the politicians are going, we could have 100,000 in 2 weeks on this program if we let doctors just.
Well, you know what else might have happened too? They said we did how much money with 4,000 people?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other
we did $1 million with 4,000 people. We did how many millions with 4,000?
That's right. Sir.
Multiply that by about 100.
Yeah. Now multiply that by 100 and see what we get.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing that's driving
how much money did we make off those patients, Smithers?
The other thing that's driving it greatly is that doctors are starting to get educated and read reports and surveys and studies that say cannabis helps people get off of opiates. And if I'm treating someone for pain with an opiate and the patient says to me, hey, doc, do you think I could try medical cannabis? If a doctor's worth a shit, he's going to say yes, because there's far fewer complications and ramifications of taking medical cannabis than there are opioids. So right on Louisiana, we're going to see that across. We're going to see that a lot more in these states.
Andrew, you and I went to the symposium probably about 2 years ago.
Over 2 years ago.
Over 2 years ago, where this doctor was saying exactly that. He said, and I don't know what the numbers are. You probably remember what they are, but adding cannabis, THC, to an opiate or opioid, drug treatment increases the efficacy of the opium or opioid, so you don't get that creeping, tolerance.
That's right. What the doctor said was 1 milligram of THC can greatly increase the efficiency or the of an opiate painkiller. Wow. And what it does, it doesn't make it stronger, so you might overdose on it. That doesn't happen. It just helps the pain killing part of it work.
Right.
So you don't need as much. You don't become as dependent, and it's going to be easier to get off the opiate. I know I had some major surgery 9 years ago, and open heart surgery, and they had me on a morphine drip for
not as major as they get
for weeks. Right. And when I came off, man, they were just throwing the Oxycontins and all those things at me. Percocets, all that. And all the doctors are giving it to me.
Right.
Sure.
And I started. One thing I did, I started taking less opiate and a Tylenol, and then I used some cannabis, and I increased the cannabis and decreased the opiates, and I was off it in like 3 weeks. It was done.
Wow.
Done with it.
Wow.
And I didn't have not one doctor ever told me to slow down on the opiates or ever deny me or even question me when I asked for a refill on my opiates, which I didn't do too many times after the hospital.
Right.
And I had so many doctors, I could have played four hands against the middle, and I know I could have gotten piles of opiates.
Right. And hugely addicted.
Yeah, but then again, this was 9 years ago.
Right.
So this is at the peak of the problem.
But this is how people get addicted to opiates.
Right.
So anyway, this is a good reason for the people in Louisiana, the government of Louisiana, to
and other states. So right
Cheers.
on. All right.
Yeah.
Nevada. State officials today moved to grant unconditional pardons to thousands of Nevadans with low-level cannabis convictions. This is something we're seeing as a trend, too, in a lot of states. I have a couple states with the same kind of legislation. The move comes 1 week after Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak initially proposed the idea of issuing blanket pardons to persons convicted of minor cannabis possession offenses. So basically, it's not an expungement, but they're doing a blanket. So you don't have if you have a conviction in the past for less than an ounce, nonviolent. Right. You would have to go to a judge, you have to get a lawyer, you have to do all this shit. They're going to have a blanket pardon. It automatically.
So individuals don't have to go to court and apply for this and supplicate themselves before the magistrate. And
yeah, that's right. So the move summarily pardons an estimated 15,000 people who were previously convicted of offenses involving the possession of up to an ounce of cannabis, according to the board's website. So
we've been calling for this for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Right on. And we're seeing the same thing in Illinois, the state of Washington, and a couple other states are doing a very similar thing. Basically legislating pardons across the board. So it
I
takes
think that's wonderful.
Great.
takes the burden away from the individual to go.
And doesn't it just make sense? Just
Yeah,
as it
absolutely.
normally followed that if an act is no longer illegal, the people should not be carrying around the illegality of it on the record.
Exactly.
It's
the next
so
one is
logical.
The next story is Colorado. Same thing. Legislation before Democratic Governor Jared Polis, I think that's how you pronounce it, provides the office with expanded powers to pardon those with past cannabis convictions. The language of the bill seeks to facilitate greater diversity and social equity within the retail cannabis industry. It permits the office of the governor to grant pardons to a class of defendants who were convicted of possession. Same deal. Right. So Colorado's doing the same thing.
It's like a class action.
Exactly.
Instead of a suit, it's a pardon.
Which is how it should be.
So in all the states where it's currently illegal, when you're arresting these people, it's only a matter of time until it gets expunged.
Yeah, that's right. But it's still a hassle for the individual.
Right.
Next is we got a story out of Maine.
Stop arresting people.
And this is an interesting a story about a lawsuit. This is out of Portland Press Herald by Penelope Overton. It's about a legal action. The state's largest cannabis company is challenging the constitutionality of Portland's cannabis licensing system in federal court. The Wellness Connection of Maine, which operates 4 of Maine's 8 medical cannabis dispensaries, claims Portland is depriving out-of-state companies, such as itself, of the constitutional right to interstate commerce by using a scoring system that favors Maine residents as the city decides which businesses will get one of its 20 recreational cannabis licenses. So what's happening in Portland is they've legalized adult use.
Right.
And so and they face a surplus of applicants who want.
Okay, so
to get a
if I own a medical marijuana dispensary and I'm selling to card holding patients, and recreational use comes to the state, I can't just start selling recreationally.
Cannot. Nope, you got to get a separate license.
All right, that's
yes. So
yeah. That's how they did it in Colorado. In Colorado, when they legalized recreational use, all the medical dispensaries just open the doors
just automatically, right?
Grandfathered in.
And that was the thing. I mean, all these people are investing all this money to get into the cannabis industry. You get them the medical, and in some ways they're doing this so when recreational comes around, that's sort of going to be their windfall.
Yeah, you would think,
right?
Well, this is just the city of Portland. This isn't the state. Portland faces a surplus of applicants, which is likely if they do. They will use the scoring system they've set up. And what it is it's a 34-point system in 8 different categories, of which the city councilors consider favorable licensing criteria, such as having 150 grand in liquid assets. That's a requirement. You get extra points for that. 2 of those categories favor locals, including a 4-year residency bonus worth 5 points and a previous state business license bonus worth 4 points. Wellness would like to sell recreational cannabis at its Congress Street dispensary, but Portland's scoring matrix puts it as an out-of-state business because the Congress Street dispensary is 51% owned by them, who is a Maine company, but 49% of the company is owned by High Street Capital Partners LLC of Delaware. So that's the issue. So the lawsuit will be settled after the licenses go out, obviously, because the legal system moves.
Right.
So they're asking for an injunction from a judge.
Right. A stay. Yeah.
So we'll follow that. We'll see what happens. Maine is projecting its statewide market to clock in at about $300 million a year. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. The next state we got here is Missouri, and this is out of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch by Nassim Benchambani. I hope I got that right. 2 Missouri businesses are now able to legally grow cannabis after passing inspections of the State Department of Health. So Missouri is moving along with their cannabis program. Voters approved an Amendment 2 in November of 2018 with over 65% of the voters. In all, about 60 commercial cannabis growing facilities are expected to operate in Missouri. 60.
Man.
Yeah. And so,
across the whole state.
And if I believe you're allowed to grow, but the deal, it's really fun. You got to buy seeds from, a licensed Missouri. I think I had this right. And the issue here is the corona thing has shut down the inspections, the growing, so nothing's opening up. So they're announcing that 2 have finally passed inspection and are moving forward.
Right.
Arkansas, we have the same kind of thing. Arkansas regulators approved 6 cultivation licenses to support a rapidly growing medical cannabis market, which is nearing 100 million in total sales.
Wow.
So, I mean, some of these states that are going legal is just kind of shocking to me. Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma. Who would have thought it? So the Arkansas.
Well, I mean, Arkansas is one thing. You know, we think of Arkansas and Missouri as kind of, flyover country. Missouri's got 2 major cities.
That's
it's got
true.
St. Louis and Kansas City.
That's true.
So
That's
they're big metropolises. So
That's right.
There's a lot of that. Not so much Arkansas. What's the biggest place they got in Little Rock, maybe?
Little Rock? I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, I think it says that there's a lot of red states that really stand behind cannabis reform.
I think that's great.
I think what they're saying, more and more Republicans,
That's true.
I
That's
think
interesting.
especially the younger ones, I believe, as I understand it, are coming up going, guys, this is ridiculous. It's about
dumb.
it's about time. It's dumb. It's dumb.
Well, with
And-
these states that have the ballot initiatives and amendments, politicians have nothing to do with it, really. I mean,
Right.
So that's really
what the politicians are basically relegated to the details.
right, which they screw up usually.
Yeah.
Well, when I worked with the DC Cannabis campaign, when you talk to anyone about advocating whether to vote to sign the petition or to vote yes for the ballot initiative, it was like a no-brainer. I mean, I only really talked to like 1 or 2 people
Is that right?
actually like debated it with me.
Yeah,
Everyone else was, I said, don't forget to vote yes on 71, and they were going like, well, hell yeah, like duh.
Duh.
Everyone was like, sure,
Well,
sure.
Arkansas
Gives you hope.
Arkansas had an amendment on the ballot in 2016, I think it was. Yeah, 2016. And a lot of people predicted it wouldn't pass. It passed overwhelmingly. I mean, they had 53%, which is huge
Yeah,
because
we
it was
covered
only
that.
like 30 that voted against it. So that's my state update, gentlemen. That's it. That's what I got.
All right.
And just one more. I'll just say one thing. When I was working for the DC Cannabis campaign on election day down there, they were voting to legalize it, and this older gentleman was walking up, and I said, and I went up to, and I said, "Don't forget to vote yes for legalization." And he looked at me, and there was tears in his eyes, and he said, "I've been waiting 40 years to do
Wow. No
Wow.
kidding.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of surprising. And harken back, the 3 of us have gone to a couple dispensaries together. I'm always shocked by who's in the waiting rooms in those places. It's guys our age, man. It's at least that's what I've seen. I mean, there's young people too.
Oh, it's a lot, but
it's shocking.
A lot of the
how
people
many-
behind the counter are younger.
Yes, absolutely.
But the people in the waiting room are our age.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing.
I guess we have more ailments that need
That's right.
need
No,
treatment.
I know I do. I tell you what, man. I had a come to Jesus moment a little while ago. I have to tell you guys. I've been home with this Corona thing, right? I was just coming downstairs to come to the studio to do this, and I've lived in my house for 22 years, right? Been here a long time. I put a little extra weight on the handrail coming down the stairs. Fucking thing pulled right out of the wall. It fell on my face.
Damn, Jay.
I gotta lose some pounds, man.
You think?
No, well, it's repetitive. That thing's you've been grabbing it for 20 years,
Yeah,
and plus
you
had,
just probably loosened it over, or maybe James knocked his amp into it or something like that. Didn't
James
tell you about it.
and all his bandmates were going up and down those steps carrying equipment for.
You guys are just being
how many
nice.
years?
I'm a fat fuck, and I just put too much weight on the thing.
Well, that
Are you
sounds
okay?
like
Did you hurt
I'm
yourself?
fine. I'm fine. Just my pride's hurt a little bit.
Okay,
So
so we can
I'm-
laugh about the visual of you. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. Have
about
at
the
it, man.
pratfall.
It's time to
So
lose a couple.
we joke a lot about the crappy Mexican ditchweed we used to smoke back in the day.
Oh my gosh!
That might become a thing of the past.
Absolutely. Recently, as more and more states are rolling over, the quality of the cannabis grown in the United States is just greatly increased. And some of the best cannabis in the world is grown in the United States, and specifically in Colorado and Washington. And California and Washington, Oregon. A lot of these states are really coming out with some good products. And Maryland, we're putting out some great products here in Maryland. But along with that, what's happening is there's a decrease in demand for black market weed, and what that means, a segment of black market weed is the Mexican brickweed. That is it's seeds and sticks. There's male plants in there. It's just compressed.
They just hack it down, press it into bricks, and sell it.
It's cheap and it's low quality. So that's becoming extinct in some states and some parts of the country. Where it was prevalent for years. Now it's extinct. You just don't see it anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that a good thing?
It is a good thing. And they're saying, is this an end to the black market? And everyone's saying, no, it's not. Because there's still a demand. And as long as there's still illegal places in the United States where it's illegal, there's always going to be a black market for it. Now, but then what happens when they do legalize it and it does become federally legal and everything? They go, well, what about then? Then the black market's going to disappear. And the answer is no, it's not going to disappear then, because still
not really.
There's going to be a segment of the people who still can't buy it legally, and those are going to be everyone under 21 years old.
Right.
And
it'll be greatly reduced, but it won't go
reduced.
Away.
Right. But so the high school and college kids, at least I remember when we were that age, we were extraordinarily resourceful. I mean, especially when it came to weed, we were outrageously resourceful.
They're smart little fucks.
Right. So these kids, but they're not going to be importing brickweed. They're going to be growing it themselves. So at that point, brickweed will be gone, but the legal market won't be.
Well, good riddance to the brickweed.
Yeah.
I wonder if any of those strains are any good. A lot of the crappiness of the weed had to do with how they grew it and processed
Cured
it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
I wonder if the strains
if you took it
good.
and grew it, grew it to be sinsemilla. And if it would obviously greatly improves the quality. That always happens when you don't pollinate the plant. But,
right.
Well, we certainly all remember the days of sticks and seeds. I mean, that's just how it was.
Well, what's going to happen to all the brickweed farmers though in Mexico? Because they're saying for those guys, they're just not going to start growing better weed. That's not an answer, because that's not going to end up in the United States.
They'll find other cash crops that they can sell.
Well, poppy.
Well, maybe. But the bigger question is, what is that going to do to the drug cartels? Well, it isn't going to help. So I don't know, if it does any damage to them, who knows? We'll have to see. But it's not good news for them. And that's good news for us.
Well, one thing about the drug cartels, they're going to be out of the weed business.
Right.
There'll still be drug cartels, but they won't be growing and selling
different
marijuana
drugs.
anymore.
It'll be mostly cocaine and heroin.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
pills.
Fentanyl. Yeah.
Fentanyl
and crystal. What's the
crystal meth?
Crystal meth.
Yeah. Right.
So, well, this is an interesting story. Also, not hot off the wires, but pretty recent. Any of you go, we have the luxury of living in the Washington, D.C. area. Have you guys been to the Library of Congress?
Absolutely.
Pretty great
Many
place.
times.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Well, that's more than just the building and a bunch of books. It's a whole institution. And they have put together this, it's a web-based project, the Chronicling America project, where they are taking media from throughout U.S. history, digitizing it, and publishing it online. And one of the things that they have published is some of the late 19th century, early 20th century anti-cannabis news articles. And they really are something to see. I mean, if you haven't seen this, they're just
interesting.
They're striking. And not only what's striking about them is not only the utter ignorance about cannabis and its effects, but how unbelievably racist they are.
Oh, unbelievably.
I mean, and against primarily it's anti-Mexican propaganda. It
in
really
parts
is.
of the country, yes. But Harry Anslinger sort of doubled down on African Americans and jazz entertainers.
Right, but this even predates Harry Anslinger. This is from 1897 to 1915, and it has these stories are full of tales of sexual promiscuity and violence and insanity, all fueled by marijuana, and even the name marijuana was attached to it. Right. I don't know if anyone ever called it marijuana before.
Well, the Mexican immigrants did.
Okay,
that's where that slang term came from.
Okay,
no one else knew what it was.
So it became really a Mexican drug for the first part of the last part of the 19th century, first part of the 20th century, and this is what happened. It was a warning, or supposed to be a warning to white America that this is what happens. This is, don't be like the evil, savage Mexicans. And
It was totally, they were using it to attack Mexicans.
So can you view this stuff online? That's fascinating.
Yes, you can. You want to go to
Library of Congress.
Library of Congress, and you just do a Google search for Library of Congress and look for Chronicling America, and you'll find it.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'm checking that out.
There's lots of stuff.
Yeah.
One thing, I've spent a lot of time listening to, like, they have all these recordings from, like,
oh, really?
From
Like
the early days of recording, all this great music and all these, like, folk
jazz stuff,
or like Indian, folk songs. And
that's cool.
I found this one recording of all these Civil War veterans doing these Confederate veterans doing the rebel yell.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty wild, man. These guys, man, they were.
If you're a history buff, man.
Well, they're all a little different, but they're all pretty wild. But for example, one of these early articles from like 1897 said cannabis it impels people of the lower orders to wild and desperate deeds. Now, come on, man.
Oh my God.
How racist can you be? So
now, but there was an answer to that. Now, there was also, and you can find this on at the Library of Congress website. There was a wealth of music of all these. So they called them pipe, jug, and spoon songs. Songs about drinking and cocaine and weed.
Yeah,
and there's all kinds of slang. A lot of times you'll hear sort of slang terms and stuff, and
that's
you
where
won't
it
get it.
came
But
from.
back then, it meant that was weed, that was coke, that was alcohol.
All right.
That's
well,
interesting.
it's and as somebody who loves to study history and always kind of have it's the this is the kind of stuff from a time that we would all like to forget, but we would all do well to remember.
Exactly. So
I got a question for you, Phil. In your book, Phil wrote a book, Blood of the Summoned, and it's a thriller about, and it has vampires in it. And Phil will tell us about it in a minute. But do vampires smoke weed?
No. There wasn't any in Anglo-Saxon England. Simple as that.
Well, what about nowadays?
Oh, I don't know. They do whatever they want.
I don't know any vampires today.
Yeah, my book doesn't cover today's vampires, just back in Anglo-Saxon England. And I don't think there was any cannabis back then.
Okay.
They didn't even have potatoes, for crying out loud.
Thank God I didn't live
How do you know that?
Yeah.
No potatoes. Look,
because I included a scene that had potatoes in it, and my editor, who is an expert on a specialist in historical editing, said no potatoes.
So they didn't have any of these, is what you're telling me, right?
They
here?
didn't have those. They didn't have any fries.
No French fries. What the hell?
No hash browns. None of that crap.
Well,
anyway, but check out Phil's book, Blood of the Summoned. It's
excellent. Yeah,
good book.
Thank you, guys. Available on Amazon.
All right.
So, one thing that vampires might do is have their eyes turn red when they're about to go in for the kill. I don't know. I've never seen it happen, but I know when I was young, I carried around a bottle of Visine
all the time.
All the fucking time. I had Ozium, I had Tic Tacs, and I had Visine. And
That's right.
It didn't even the Visine didn't always help.
I saw this article today on the French Toast. Really fun website. They got a lot of fun articles on there. And it's about bloodshot eyes. Why do your eyes get bloodshot when you consume cannabis? And I never really thought about it. I mean, I knew it happened. I see it, but I didn't.
Well, for the same reason marijuana is good for glaucoma.
Yes, that's right.
Doesn't it have something to do with
it's the pressure? Yeah, it's
wow.
Weed eyes.
Good call,
the red
Andrew.
eyes have little to do with the act of smoking itself. Actually, even though it's often associated with it, the physical reaction occurs when your blood pressure drops and your heart rate increases. That's all due to the effects of THC in your system. So when your blood pressure drops, your blood vessels and capillaries dilate, including the ones in your eyes. This dilation increases blood flow, turning your eyes red and reducing intraocular pressure. Because of this, some experts believe that cannabis could be a viable option for treating glaucoma. So you're exactly right.
Well, if the pressure isn't intraocular, it's not even worth it.
Right. Exactly. Bloodshot eyes deepen depend on a lot of factors. In order to prevent them, stick to strains that have low THC. If your eyes get bloodshot, you can try having some water, using eye drops, or waiting till the effects pass. Well, I never worried about it that much, but the redder your eyes are, the higher you are typically.
Well, I came home one summer day with my eyes glowing red, and long story short, I got my ass whipped by my dad. So
I can remember my mom saying, "Why are your eyes so red? What's going on there?"
My mom noticed. She said, "Why are your eyes? Were you at the pool?" And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, good,
chlorine."
That's right. Howard and I used to tell my mom that. Because I was over to Howard's house swimming. And one day she goes, "Oh, were you over at Howard's house swimming?" We went, yeah. She goes, "It's January." It's January. That excuse doesn't really work now.
The CDC recently received a whole bunch of hundreds of comments related to the use of medical marijuana as a treatment for pain. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention here in Washington, D.C., seeking input from the public on their preferred options for pain management. They fielded comments from more than 200 patients who use cannabis for chronic pain. Many of them saying that cannabis, and this is something we've talked about, not only relieves their pain, but also reduces, and in some cases even eliminates, their reliance on conventional pain-relieving drugs such as NSAIDs and opioids. NSAIDs, of course, being aspirin, Tylenol, naproxen, that sort of thing, and opioids, OxyContin, Percocet, and the like. I think that's dovetails exactly with what we were saying before, and I think it's at least a positive step that the CDC is asking for this input. What they're going to do with it, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it's information that they have now that they didn't have before, and they have chances to listen, to some of the, tens of thousands or more than that who use cannabis on a regular basis effectively to treat their pain.
Hasn't the CDC had several surveys online where they ask the public for input on things?
Yes,
they did it with hemp. They've done it on a couple cannabis issues. I think it's great.
Well, that's one thing that's a really good sign. 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, definitely no government agency was talking about cannabis. Not seriously.
And they weren't asking us what we thought. That's
right.
For sure.
That's for sure.
That was definitely for sure.
Yeah,
so this is a great sign. Again,
it is
good sign, positive step, baby steps, but we'll take what we can get.
Actually, the government agencies coming around is not a baby step. That's a pretty big leap forward. One small step for man.
Yeah. So now, if this lawsuit filed by the folks from Arizona that we talked about in our last episode, if that is successful, again, that could strike down Schedule 1, and that would be
huge,
the turning point.
That's it.
I think so. We'll see. So it's positive signs. Hey, folks, we're really glad that you joined us today. We're having too much fun. We could talk about this for the next 2 hours, but
we could do the show again.
Thank God we're out of time.
A third take.
Our apologies to Bernie Sanders. We couldn't get to him. He was supposed to be on the show tonight, but we
couldn't get Bernie. But
I'll be back next week.
So listen, if you like the show, we hope you do. We want to hear from you. Give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. Tell a friend about us. Share some comments. Contact us. You know how to do that, Jay.
Yeah, send us an email, podcast@VoteProPot.com, or call our message line, 240-257-2441, and join our Facebook group.
Oh, me?
You.
Sorry, man. I didn't mean to wake you.
Sorry, I was getting busy here. There's so much going on in the world of cannabis. We can't cover it all on our podcast every week. So we share a lot on social networking. So go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter and do a search for Vote Pro Pot.